Welcome, everyone. I'm here with such an incredible soul. Like the moment I first met you, my heart opened. Tami Brunk. You are an astrologer that works deeply in the shamanic realms. You are a dreamer. And I really, really want to unpack that more. And we're here today to speak about your offerings that are being dreamed into existence and anything else that arises from the dreaming. So I'm going to hand it over to you to introduce yourself, and then no doubt there'll be a breadcrumb to follow.
Okay. Thank you, Samar. And of course, I felt absolutely the same about you. And I'm so honored to be here with your community. And my current work that I've been doing, and it's so funny, I'm getting like a ringing in my ear even as we speak. It is about weaving the magic of the sky, of astrology with the dreaming. And like yourself, I've worked with in Indigenous communities a great deal in my life. And so that's also something that's so near and dear to my heart. And I think part of also what kind of brought us together was Rochelle, mutual friend. And also, I know that from the beginning of meeting you, I think when I invited you to my Earth Sky Women Summit, the work that I really wanted to connect with you around was the Arvigo work and was the womb work specifically, because at one of the most intensive and essential initiations in my life was a healing crisis centered around my womb, and that actually culminated in a hysterectomy. That was something that felt like absolutely an essential part of the journey for me, though it wouldn't be for most. Um, and one of the things that I really felt at that time was that women who are going through a process like myself had no ceremonial rites. They had no kind of sacred passage. And yet I knew it, I felt it, I saw it as a rebirth. And when I asked you to come and speak at that summit, and we've had so many amazing conversations since, I have just, been so deeply moved by the level of your work with the womb. And of course, we also share a deep, deep, deep love of Ischael, because that was what really came to me through this initiation was I had so many dreams of her. I had a pilgrimage that I made when I went to her temples after my surgery that was life changing. Um, and yeah, there's just so much more, but that's just a little piece. I do dreaming astrology, lunar dreaming courses with Ishel as well. That's part of what the work that I've been doing.
I
So
mean, there's so much there. Like,
yeah.
there's so much there. Like, where do you begin? And so I just want to honor first your journey with hysterectomy and the way that you presented it as a rebirth and the ceremonial rites and that whole piece. And of course, like only share what you're called to share, but just the energy of that was the most, um, I guess, resonating first in
Mhm.
terms of lived experience and in
Yeah,
terms of like being with the body no matter what happens.
yeah,
Is there
yes,
anything around that that wants to be spoken?
absolutely. It's been the biggest teacher in my life. Um, and I would say first that I would wish for every woman that if she had gone through the experience I went through, that she had the level of holding that I did gather around myself, because I had so many tools and I had such a beautiful circle who held me. And and so that's one thing. The other is just that over the whole course, the whole initiation began with a dream that showed me that I actually, interestingly, I've been working with the divine feminine a great deal. And I think this is something that we both resonate with, right? Um, I'd been working with the Venus cycle specifically for the last 4 years, gathering women, groups of as many as sometimes 100 women in these courses. And I have 7 sisters. I have a deep orientation to the feminine. And I was even more steeped in it at that time. I was gathering new moon circles for women every month for 7 years. I did that. The dream that I had that showed me that something was out of balance in my life was it was a stag. It involved a stag. And literally there was a group of female deer in the dream. I saw the stag and I thought to myself, oh, he's just the same as they are, kind of dismissive. And in that moment, the stag separated itself from the herd, came right towards me, and its antler was aimed right at my womb. as if it would eviscerate me. I mean, it was the most vivid experience. And in that moment, I just said the only thing I could, which is, I respect you. And that's the dream that initiated my journey.
It's such a powerful dream.
Yeah, such a powerful dream and such a riddle, right? For me, it was like, because that he was showing me something was happening in my body. Obviously, he was showing me many things. He was showing me an imbalance. Um, he helped me understand over time that to the degree that you work with the sacred feminine, you must balance it with an equal um, devotion to the sacred masculine. And in my case, it was a lot of healing of my male ancestral line. I'd done a lot of work around the female, but the male needed a lot of tending. I'm still doing that work. I think that's true for many of us. A lot of women, actually, I think, need to do a lot of ancestral healing in the male line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, no. So that initiated it. But from that point forward, myself, like I think probably like you, I know, and many of the women who work with you, um, of course, I knew there was something happening in my energetic system. I knew there was something happening in my body. I started really trying to understand that. I started really paying attention to my dreams. I started having dreams of tumors in my body. And then a month later, I started feeling them. I started feeling the fibroids literally in my belly. And so it was this progression. But the whole time, again, I was really, I was speaking with Indigenous healers who I knew, and they were helping me make the connection with the sacral, chakra and the way that we often cord there, the kinds of cords that we make there. And I literally could see the places and who I was corded with at the sacral where there was needing, that healing, that cleansing, that separation. So that was the first lesson. And there were so many others that came through this question of why am I so full? Why am I so full in my womb? And so many layers of insight. And the deepest healing that I really did receive, and this was spiritual healing. And this is, again, why I love so much the work you do, because it focuses on the physical, yes, but even more so on the spiritual, was the Arvigo therapy techniques. Because a dear, dear friend from New Mexico, because I was in Missouri, she came from New Mexico. Her name was Jenya. She's part of your community. She's an amazing soulful healer. She showed me how to do the massage. She showed me how to do the castor oil packs, the sacred bathing. And that was just, so much of that was deeply healing for me, because I had just moved back to Missouri, not recently, from New Mexico. And part of my process of doing the yoni steams and the sacred bathing was I would just go out into the forest and I would reconnect with the plants that I knew as a child, the wild ginger, the sassafras, all the different plants. And they were just, it was a deep connecting with those beings. And I would gather them and, make the waters for the sacred bathing and for the steams. And it was just such a profoundly healing practice and process of healing my body. So there were so many layers at that time that were coming through. That's there's a million things I could say, and there's more, but I'll just stop there for a moment.
Mm-hmm. I mean, so many, and sending love to Zhenya, and here sending love to New Mexico that you're both connected
Yeah,
to. But
exactly.
also, what struck me so much about your sharing is this idea that the womb was so full and corded and
Yeah.
connected, and the deep nature of the feminine and the
Mm-hmm.
body that holds the uterus.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something I'll share without going into any detail. I've been in a really deep process personally around my capacity to give love and let people in and their inability to receive. And in the inability to receive, the kind of lashing out that can happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just curious there, because this is something that I feel so many women and people, regardless of how they present or show up,
Mm-hmm.
is the longing to be let in, to stay in communion, and then all the poison that meets them in that place.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's something more there in that conversation, and
Yeah.
I'm curious if anything's stirring for you.
All the poison that meets them in that place. Wow. Yeah, wetlands. I feel like with this, it's very interesting because I feel it's related to the fact that most of us in the conversation are empaths, but the way we orient around that can appear very different. And so there's something that maybe in the world of attachment theory you could speak to as avoidant, or, so, right. So there's something that can happen in that reality. Um, I think, wow, yeah. So there's something, could you say it again? Because it's really interesting. It's interesting what you're saying, and I want to understand it better.
Well, I think, we brought up this very general realm of hysterectomy,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
something, it can be such a taboo because
yeah,
of shame,
yeah.
because of a sense of being less, or a
Mm,
sense, or simply the unresolved trauma that led to whatever pathology was there in the first place.
yes,
So when you
exactly.
talked about being corded and the womb being so full of cords and connections to people you really had to disconnect from, where
Hmm.
my consciousness went was, what keeps women and people connected to
Yeah.
things that are toxic for them?
Okay. Yes. What keeps us connected? It's such a good question. I think it's familiarity. We're so familiar with the feeling. I would often say to women is that when we're accustomed to absorbing or bringing in, but maybe we're not quite as good at being very deeply present in our own womb, which I think is true for many of us, um, then what can happen is it's almost like, and I see this with people who have a lot of Pisces or Neptune in their charts, for those who follow astrology, a lot of it. Um, it's almost like often what happens is there's some kind of a penetration or violation that happens early on, and it's usually energetic. For me, it was my mother. She was profoundly ill when she had me. She had 2 miscarriages after I was born. So I think there was kind of a penetration of my field where this is so common, the energy shifted. So I was giving her my life force rather than the other way around. This is no one's fault. It's simply that thing that often happens in this culture of depletion, right? So I became accustomed really early on to kind of almost like opening my field. I would say, come on in and have some of this nectar. It was a survival tactic, but also, we're these beautiful bright lights. We're born and we want to give. We're just a source of love, but we're in a physical body that only has so much that it can actually give. So I think that's what happens for a lot of us is we like the feeling of allowing everyone in. We like the feeling of receiving, the connection, but there's a distortion in it. And so but it's almost like when the idea or the even concept of clearing our own specific energy field and just feeling ourselves and divine, that can feel very foreign for a lot of us who are deeply entrained into very codependent patterns. Does that make sense?
Oh, completely.
That's
Yeah,
kind of how it feels
absolutely.
to me.
Absolutely. And I
It's,
think like
yeah.
there'd be so many, versions and takes on that for each individual, but it felt like you had medicine to offer
Mhm.
because of the consciousness with which you approached this huge transition in your life.
Yeah.
And the,
Yeah. But I think that's such a good question. Why do we? And I think I learned so much, but I had a couple of shamanic practitioners who were teaching me that I'd become so accustomed to letting other people come in and literally kind of attach. I didn't realize and then kind of extract. That's what I was accustomed to. I didn't even know what I was doing. And I'd invite it actually. Kind of like a vampire, you have to invite it in. That's a really important principle. You do. And you can say no more, but it can be extremely difficult to say no more because often deep love is part of it. That's the most difficult. So, but I felt that what these shamanic practitioners were telling me is that instead of being in that phase of receiving more, I needed to actually learn how to penetrate more out into the world. That was the lesson. And so one of these individuals said to me after the surgery and everything, he said, for some period of time, you cannot allow anything to penetrate your fields. Nothing is in your field except you and divine. That's it. Nothing else. No one else. And that was a really important phase in my life, but also he said, play with, you might find someone who is a shamanic type and it's with permission. play with being the one who penetrates their field, but you do not allow them to penetrate yours. And so that was kind of a practice for me. Um, I will say that I think in many cases like my own, that there's usually a relationship, a love relationship that's related to what's happening. And my example was very, very clear and vivid, because when I was during the time of this initiation, when it first started, I was in a 10-year relationship that I ended up leaving. But then within probably 6 months, I had had quite a number of experiences that were really intense, including going to Standing Rock and ending up in a relationship that was very intense. And this relationship accelerated the process for me. And it was a deep, deep love and also tremendous trauma that this individual carried at a level that was just immense. And so I knew, there was a part of me that knew what I had actually set up was like what they refer to in the alchemical process as an abetting. Some part of my soul had created a context to abet or speed up the process, to the degree that we can put that kind of positive spin on something, right? But I feel like some part of me was choosing that. And from that process, the fibroids grew very rapidly, and I had no option except surgery. And in my case, part of the reason I felt it was a rebirth was because the way I sensed and felt and knew it was that my womb literally had absorbed, and it was carrying the imprint of the traumas I'd had in this lifetime, what I absorbed from lovers, what I had experienced from past lifetimes, and my ancestral. And so all of that, I felt I was making an offering at that time. I was offering that. And so that it would be a new imprint, a new energetic imprint when I was, after that happened. And of course, as you know, by no means would I say women should just go out and get hysterectomies. It was always something I was aware had been done far too often for women. So, yeah.
Yeah, so grateful for this conversation because it's really about consciousness with whatever's happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's not really about a value judgment on any specific procedure. And given the politics of the world we're in right now on women's health, I think it's really potent to go beyond the surface layer and just say in every single case, there's a different set of circumstances. And you touched on cosmic circumstances,
Mm-hmm.
intergenerational circumstances, interpersonal circumstances, early childhood circumstances, and then one's own system's ability to eliminate that where and how. And,
Absolutely.
there's so much, and I think we are in danger as a culture of losing nuance.
Absolutely.
And
I know. I know there is, and life is nuanced. It's and at this time it could be, so clear, it's so complex.
And I mean, for me, this is just me. It's like I want to live with the nuance. It's so much richer than just tasting hot, cold, good,
Yeah,
bad, dark,
absolutely.
light. Like
Yeah.
polarity is great, but it's boring.
Yeah, that's true. It
Really
is.
boring if that's the only thing you're looking at. And so I just feel like you're speaking about this in a way that it's rarely spoken about. And I'm going to make an assumption here, possibly because you navigated the trauma to an extent that you can look back on this and speak to it with reverence. And you spoke
Mm,
about the offering of your organ as an offering,
yeah.
as actually an offering. And there's such a beauty in that
Mm,
I think even just that, and anyone listening who's had a hysterectomy or anything along these lines, to just be like, oh, I'm thinking of my partner Steve and his accident, and um, you know, this little jar of like bone fragments from his spine that was in the freezer for so long, and then the
mm,
day that he knew it was time to make the offering and to
mm,
take it to the big tree in the backyard and to give his body to that tree so that they would then start to become part of each other, and
mm.
the pieces. And then my dog, when she had her teeth extracted, and then that was an offering. And so there's a lot of body parts in the backyard actually, but it's just a really it's a remembering of an old way
Yes.
of everything being sacred,
Yes.
including pain.
Everything. Yeah, every part of it. Mm. Yeah,
And
it's the
so
whole picture.
that weaves into something you said about Ischael. And I just want to preface, like, honoring that she comes from a specific culture.
Mm.
And I was just speaking to Donna Lihio's niece, Maria, and she said the sweetest thing. She said, we as Maya people, we're very generous. We let everybody in. And I think that kind of, this was in a private conversation prior to her
Mm-hmm.
um, shared, but it was just, I was like, oh, like just absorbing what that means
Yeah.
and all the different ways that could be heard and felt,
Mm.
and acknowledging like that has been an experience with
Mm.
this energy, this being that is called Ishchel bioregionally,
Yeah.
that may come by other names in other places. Okay, I think there's a dragonfly behind the door, but I'll let you know if something's buzzing hard. Anyway, so what I have to say about this is, and of course, like, I'm not Maya, and I'm not pretending to be Maya at all. Um, but I have had very deep experiences with this being and all the things this being represents. She's come in dreams. She's been this, the calling to go on pilgrimage to those lands. Like, crazy things have happened. Um, I'm curious, like, what is there from her that you wish to speak to?
Mm. Thank you for saying all of that. When I went to her temple in Cozumel, I took some of my blood because I saved some blood from before my hysterectomy, and I made an offering. And when I made the offering, I made it saying that I would no longer heal with my body, and that was really essential. Um, she has felt like a very deep friend. One of the visions where she came to me was as her maiden form. And she showed me the two of us, forehead to forehead. And she was showing me, she said, the way to connect with the goddess at this time is really as sisters. It's as a sister relationship. She showed me that was a way that was appropriate in that context where, yes, as deity, yes, as potent deity, but there was something about um, human to deity sisterhood that felt important on a level of not giving our power in a way that was distorted. If that makes sense. Like you have had a lot of insights that have come through her. One of them as well was when I see dragonflies, when I see swifts, when I see swallows, I always know she's close. One of the interesting ones was this thing that she showed me where swallows, swifts, that whenever when they fly, and they fly in big groups, that they, in a way, when we have visions, and when we're really connecting into higher wisdom, that they are in fact a kind of a clearing field, that there's a way that they can clear our field to be sure that the insight we receive is really clear. Because part of what I was learning from her and from the research I was doing is that at the time that there was a period of time where the spiritual integrity of the people, even in Cozumel, was in some way compromised by some of the shifts and changes in the cultures around. And that's similar to now, and so always as oracles, as seers, as the ones who have the visions, that it's so important for us to cultivate practices so that we're really sure that what we're bringing in is really clear. She was showing me that in certain practices for that. So yeah, there's so much to say about her, but I also just have such a deep love for her because she was the one who served women, every kind of woman, in all of their rites of passage in such a way that's very real and very, very earthy. And as much as I love Mother Mary and many other expressions of the great goddess, um, that her earthiness, her connection to the blood mysteries, to midwifery, to healing, all those things just feel so deeply healing to me. It feels like a mending of some sort.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I've been trying to find this dragonfly while you're talking because I can hear it. I can't see it because it's that sound, you know. Um, and I've been here and there's been a lot of swallows, and so I was just kind of in the storytelling and in the listening. And what was striking me so much was similar to, say, a plant, right? Like if an oak approaches you, or basil approaches you, or sagebrush approaches you, or a pahudakawa in Aotearoa approaches you. I mean, in a sense, I feel like humility is they know more than me.
Mm,
And with
mm,
some of these beings that have been
mm,
given names and the
mm,
energies behind them, it's like, okay, if this comes,
mm,
just be humble,
mm,
and there's
mm.
so much loaded around it, but in a sense we almost miss the point.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate you sharing all of that. It was beautiful. um, Tell me
Mhm.
about astrology and dreams and
Mm.
the synergy between them.
I think we live in a very incredible time on so many levels. And from the perspective of astrology, so many people are waking up to it. And I think often when I think part of what my immediate love of the of Ischael and of trying to consider what that her world was like, the world of her priestesses, of the sacred culture built around her, was that they would have had a strong relationship with the sky, the living sky, as well as the dreams. But in my tradition, um, specifically the astrology that I learned, there's a strong understanding that at a time like now, like a turning of an age, that it's so important for us to also be kind of birthing new and ancient understandings around each of the archetypes and the signs. There have been distortions in the way we look at stars, for example, superstition, a lot of fear around eclipses, these kinds of things. And some of that is just deep respect, and that's important. Um, and some of it is also these accumulated layers of misunderstandings around a particular sign that's been out of favor for 5,000 years, like Scorpio, for example. So each of the signs, like a human, has a core essence to it. And so one of the things I feel most deeply passionate about is tuning into what that core essence is for the signs, like the wellspring, the deeper well, and tuning into its original essence, and then dreaming forward. What does it want to be expressed as in this period? So I've a lot of my deeper courses take people through a process of where we are actively all exploring what is Aries really, and what is the moon really, and how do we connect into its essence. And we do that through the dreaming. We do that through being connected to when the moon aspects these different beings and what comes through. That's my favorite work, really.
So basically, allowing them to be the people that they are.
Exactly. I see them as people. Exactly. And yes, and they've been through their own trauma, in these last 5,000 years. So it's for us to also kind of hold them with lots of love and understanding. Okay, Capricorn, holy cow, what you've been through, what Cancer's been through, each of these archetypes. Yeah. And
To be able to feel rather than like define.
yes, exactly, precisely. Precisely.
Because it
Yes.
really, it does truly feel like any foray into what we call Western astrology.
Mm.
Like, it really feels like beings,
Yeah.
like these pieces of the sky that are emanations of certain qualities, and that it is our interconnectedness with the wider world. And in a
Mm.
sense, I experience it as part of a very large body
Mm.
We are molecules or cells in a very, very large body, and there's like a reason that Leo is associated with the heart, or Cancer is associated with the breasts, or whatever. It is a giant body.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, I could talk about this for a very long time, but I feel like that's a really unique approach. And also, all the astrologers that there's so much resonance with, they're all speaking about it so differently, which is like, how have you come up with a new way of looking at this?
Yeah, yeah, of
It's really
course.
amazing.
It's a flourishing of that, the different eco. And I think what I'm finding lately that I'm fascinated by is the idea that you get deep enough into the essence of each sign, and there's going to be a landscape that is kind of the original essence. And one of those landscapes for Cancer, I've been feeling, are those deep wells, those deep pools, whether that's Bridget's well or a cenote in Yucatan, but that deeper than the human even can be really useful to feel into.
That it's so poetic and beautiful. Like, I need time to unpack it.
I know, right?
So, okay, tell me about what you're offering, because you have a few really profound offerings coming up.
Thank you. Yes. Um, so I am going to be offering a 3-month intensive from the fall equinox through the winter solstice. It's an online course, clearly. And it is an extension of a 5-week course that I recently taught. And it really does take the different medicine, the teachings that came through so strongly for me that I think are very universal for women who are wanting to be deeply connected to the womb and to really tend to some of these areas that we've talked about and really come home to their core essence, to their wombs. So it's to support women in that process. And I will be bringing in other teachers, other facilitators. Hopefully you, Samar, would be one of those in the online portion. And I also am so excited that we are going to be having a live workshop in Cozumel. This is something I've been dreaming into for a long time. I know you have too, Samar. And it will be the week before Thanksgiving. So I'm still finalizing a few of those details, but that is, it's for a fairly small group. It's going to be an intimate group. And I'm so excited that Samar, you've offered to be there for that period as well. So the final details, I'm very close to that. I know it's available. And the only question right now is if we begin to open it now to whoever wishes to come, or if it's part of that longer workshop. So that's the most essential thing coming up. And then I will say one other thing is Sisters North and South is something that came through for me also through this work with Ischael. And it's a very strong dream that came through around gathering women to the original vision was recreating the pilgrimage routes, but specifically what it was coming into as well was creating very strong allyship between women who are healers, women who are conscious, you could say entrepreneurs. I don't know that I'm still feeling into the best way to even describe that. But who have communities of women who are waking up to this ancient wisdom, bringing those women together and weaving them with Indigenous female leaders in such a way that they can really support their work, whether that's land defense, cultural protection, missing and murdered Indigenous women, so really finding a way to weave these communities such that it deeply benefits the Indigenous women, visibilizes what they're working through, and in a safe way that causes, a deep well of resources and healing and mutual upliftment. So, and my dream is that in May, it's always been May 20th. Both of these occasions will be at the solar zenith, which is sacred timing in those lands. So May 20th, around that time, would be a workshop that I'm actually going to be seeking funding for, because I want that workshop in Cozumel to just specifically be for the Indigenous female leaders. And that's part of what I want the allyship for, is to raise funds to ensure that these women who are on the ground, who are doing this incredible work, are given context, sacred context, where they can receive really deep nurturance and be given those offerings, and that they also can come together and really connect resources so that they can strengthen each other. So that's the vision.
Oh my gosh. So beautiful. Thank you for naming all of that, and naming the level of struggle that Indigenous women and people are going through, and
Yeah.
that the understandable exhaustion and frustration with people who are benefiting from their spiritual practices but don't really understand their day-to-day fight.
Yes. Yes.
And it's such a fine line all the time.
Yes.
And it's just like, can we just have more compassion for everyone all the
Yeah.
time?
Yeah.
And thank you for the
Absolutely.
invitation to Cozumel. The
Mm.
last time I was there, I had a very profound experience. Like, I was led by a dream, and it's interesting you mentioned pilgrimage routes. It's like I was very clearly told in the dreams, you have to go to Isla Mujeres and then make the pilgrimage exactly how it would have happened, even though it's by ferry and bus. And there was an Australian film translated into Spanish on the bus, and it was really funny. And then you have to do it all in one day.
Mm.
And when I got there, it was like finally like bedraggled, like show up at like 5 p.m. Um, and I'm like, I've come all the way from New Zealand. And the guard was like, no ceremonies, like, no. And I'm like, I'm not, I just need to say a prayer. Like, I don't even know why I'm here. I was just like told to come. And then I had this really beautiful moment where he was like, he looked around and he saw something and he goes, just wait for the tourists to go. He's like, I'm going to take you to Templo Ischael, and then, you know, I won't say what else because some cordons were violated and some prayers were done in places maybe tourists shouldn't be allowed to do them.
Yeah.
But
Mm-hmm.
that was, it was a blessing. It was really beautiful
Mm.
because it didn't feel like, it feels like when you're not doing something from your selfishness, but when you're doing something from really being asked to do something, then doors
Yes.
open for you to do them.
Yes.
And what I'm hearing behind this whole conversation is our humanity. Like, it's actually just, that's really what lights me up, is like we have
Mm.
so much emotional pain as a species that we need to navigate before we can get to our humanity. But if we don't get to our humanity, we're not going to protect this planet from our sickness.
Mm.
So I'm just really grateful for all
Mm.
the work that you're doing that is cultivating humanity in so many different ways.
Thank you so much, Samar. Mm. Mm. Thank you so much. Yeah, I hear that. I hear that to the core of my heart. Mm.
Thank you. Is there a closing prayer or blessing you'd like to do today?
Mm. Wow. Maybe just very simple. Mm. Mm. Yeah, may this flowering of remembrance, this remembrance of what it means to be waist deep in the mysteries of the earth and sky, this remembrance of what it means to have our hearts and our roots so deeply entwined with the aliveness of our beautiful earth. May this journey to come home to who we really are, may it just all be blessed. May we remember what's most necessary to remember, and may we do it together, and may it just be sourced in the truest love. Blessed be.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Samar.